Han Sol stood in the empty embassy hall, his footsteps echoing off marble walls that had once buzzed with diplomatic activity. The human embassy on Zenthari Prime had been the heart of human-alien relations for over 2 centuries. Now it felt like a tomb. He walked to his desk and activated the communication array one last time. The holographic display showed hundreds of incoming messages from council members, alien journalists, and trade partners, all asking the same question. Where? Did the humans go? Han Sol ignored them all. Instead, he opened a single encrypted file marked Final Protocol. His fingers trembled as he began recording his last official message as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council. This is Ambassador Han Sol of the Human Embassy. As of today, all human diplomatic missions are officially closed. We thank the Council for their cooperation over the past centuries. This transmission marks the end of human participation in galactic affairs. He paused, looking around the empty room. Yesterday, 30 staff members had worked here. Today, he was alone. They had all left on the last transport ships, carrying only what they could hold. Everything else was left behind, as ordered. We leave in peace, Han Sol continued. Our colonies, stations, and facilities are hereby abandoned. Any species may claim them as they see fit. We ask only that you remember us as we were, partners in peace, seekers of knowledge, and friends to all who would have us. He stopped the recording and transmitted it on all frequencies. Within minutes, it would reach every corner of the galaxy. Then he deleted the encryption codes, wiped the embassy computers, and picked up his small travel bag. At the spaceport, Yejin waited beside the last human ship in Zenthari space. The captain was young for such responsibility, but these were not normal times. Her ship, the Soul's Dream, was a modest transport vessel that had been retrofitted for long-distance travel. Ambassador, she said, saluting as Han Sol approached. We're ready for departure. How many are aboard? Han Sol asked. 47, the last humans from this sector. Yejin's voice was steady, but Han Sol could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes. Sir, may I ask where we're going? Han Sol looked up at the alien sky. 3 moons hung overhead, casting strange shadows across the landing pad. In a few hours, this would no longer be his concern. To the rendezvous point. From there, he shrugged. Somewhere safe. As they boarded the ship, alien security forces watched from a distance. The Zenthari had been polite but firm. Humans were no longer welcome on their worlds. The decision had come from the highest levels of government, though no one would explain why. Yejin sealed the airlock and made her way to the bridge. The ship's engines hummed to life, lifting them away from the planet's surface. As they climbed through the atmosphere, Han Sol watched the massive city below grow smaller. He had lived there for 15 years. Now he would never see it again. All human vessels, this is Sol's Dream, Yejin broadcast on the emergency frequency. We are clear of Zenthari space and proceeding to Rally Point 7. The response came immediately. Dozens of voices confirmed their positions. Passenger, ships, cargo haulers, military escorts, research vessels, the entire human presence in this part of the galaxy was moving as one. On the planet Kepler 442b, Taemin finished destroying his laboratory. 20 years of research went into the recycling units. Quantum computers, dimensional resonance equipment, prototype engines, all of it reduced to base materials. His assistant, a young Krillian named Click 9, watched in confusion. Professor, Taemin, why destroy such valuable work? Taemin smiled sadly. Because it's too dangerous to leave behind. But the applications, the energy efficiency alone could power entire worlds. Exactly. Taemin wiped his hands on a cleaning cloth. Some knowledge is too powerful for young civilizations. Click 9's antenna drooped. You think we are not ready? I think you will be someday, but not today. Taemin picked up his personal bag. Study hard, Click 9. Learn slowly. Rush nothing. Outside, the last human transport was loading passengers. Families carried crying children, scientists clutched precious data tablets, workers said goodbye to alien friends they had known for decades. The evacuation was orderly but heartbreaking. Taemin boarded the ship and found a seat near a window. As they lifted off, he watched his laboratory complex disappear into the distance. The Krillians would explore the empty buildings tomorrow. They would find basic equipment, simple computers, standard technology, nothing that could hurt them. The really dangerous stuff was already gone, loaded onto special ships that had left weeks ago, ships that were heading to places the Galactic Council could never find. In the council chambers on the neutral station, Harmony, emergency sessions ran around the clock. Representatives from 47 species demanded answers that no one could provide. Vexithara, the Zenthari council leader, stood at the central podium. Her scaled face showed no emotion, but her tail twitched with barely controlled excitement. "Fellow council members," she began, "we are witnessing an unprecedented event. The humans have voluntarily removed themselves from galactic society." "Voluntarily?" interrupted Glextar, the Krillian representative. "This was coordinated, planned. They didn't just decide to leave yesterday." "Which proves they never belonged here," Vexthara replied smoothly. "A species that can vanish overnight was never truly committed to our community." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Nethys delegate, speaking through a water-filled communications sphere, bubbled their approval. Human unpredictability was always concerning. Their rapid expansion, their refusal to follow traditional development patterns, their annoying habit of asking uncomfortable questions, added the silicon-based Kristark representative. Vexithara nodded. Exactly. The humans never understood their place. They pushed boundaries, questioned authority, and developed technology at dangerous speeds. Now they've removed themselves before causing real damage. High above the council chambers, automated, sensors detected the last human ship leaving the Harmony system. It was a small research vessel that had been docked for repairs. The ship's captain, a woman named Sora, transmitted a brief farewell message before jumping to hyperspace. "Thank you for the hospitality. May you find the peace you seek." Then she was gone, following a course that led toward the galaxy's outer rim. The sensors tracked her ship until it disappeared beyond the edge of known space. In the weeks that followed, reports came in from across the galaxy. Human colonies abandoned, research stations emptied, military bases evacuated. Every single human presence, from the smallest outpost to the largest city, had been quietly vacated. They left behind infrastructure, technology, and resources worth trillions of credits. Entire planets with thriving ecosystems, space stations with advanced life support systems, and ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks instead of months. Most mysteriously, they left behind no clues about where they had gone. No forwarding, addresses, no communication protocols, no way to contact them. They had simply vanished, as if they had never existed at all. The alien species began claiming human territories almost immediately. The Zenthari expanded their empire by 300%. The Krillians took over industrial worlds that doubled their manufacturing capacity. The Nethys claimed underwater cities that allowed them to expand beyond their oceanic homeworlds. Within months, the galactic economy had restructured itself around the abandoned human assets. Trade routes shifted, political alliances reformed, and the balance of power settled into new patterns. And through it all, the Galactic Council told themselves they were better off without the humans. They were safer, more stable, more predictable. The galaxy had returned to its natural order. None of them noticed the strange readings coming from the outer rim. Long-range sensors detected unusual energy signatures in the darkness between galaxies, but the data was dismissed as background radiation. No one thought to wonder why the humans had been so eager to leave behind everything they had built. No, one asked what could be so terrible that an entire species would abandon their homes without explanation. The humans were gone, and the galaxy celebrated its newfound peace. But in the dark spaces beyond the edge of known space, something else was stirring. Something ancient and hungry and patient. Something that the humans had been watching for a very long time. 6 months after the humans left, the galaxy had never been more prosperous. Council leader Vexithara stood on the observation deck of her new flagship, watching cargo ships load rare minerals from what used to be the human colony of New Sol. The planet was hers now. Officially, it belonged to the Zenthari Empire, claimed under ancient salvage laws. The humans had left behind 3 billion credits worth of mining equipment, processed materials, and fully functional cities. All of it was now Zenthari property. "Status report," she commanded. Her aide, a young Zenthari named Rex Thon, consulted his datapad. "The final human structures have been cleared from Sector 7. Our engineers estimate another 2 months before full integration into our infrastructure network." Vexathera nodded with satisfaction. The humans had been efficient builders. Their cities required minimal modification to accommodate Zenthari physiology. Their power plants were more advanced than anything her empire had possessed. Their transportation systems moved goods faster than Zenthari technology could manage. What about the other claimed territories? Proceeding ahead of schedule. The Krillians have activated 17 human industrial complexes. Production output in their space has increased by 400%. The Nethys have successfully modified 8 underwater cities for their use. Even the smaller species are reporting significant resource gains. Through the viewport, Vexathara watched automated systems load another cargo ship. The human machines worked perfectly, requiring no oversight or maintenance. They seemed designed to run forever without breaking. "Down. Have we found any security concerns? Hidden systems, trap programs, anything dangerous?" Rexthon shook his head. "Nothing, leader. The humans appear to have left everything in perfect working order. No viruses, no locked systems, no hidden surveillance. It's as if they wanted us to take their things." On the former human research world of Terra Nova, Dr. Buzik made the discovery of his career. The Krillian scientist stood in what used to be Bora's archaeological laboratory, examining equipment that was centuries ahead of his species' technology. The human scientist Bora had been studying ancient ruins scattered across the planet. Her research notes, left behind in the evacuation, described artifacts that suggested advanced civilizations had existed in this galaxy long before any current species evolved. But it was her equipment that fascinated Buzik. Quantum dating devices that could determine the age of objects with impossible precision, molecular scanners that could analyze materials down to the atomic level, translation matrices that could decode any written language. "Assistant Chirip," he called to his aide, "have you completed the analysis of the human computer systems?" The younger Krillian buzzed excitedly. "Yes, Doctor. The quantum processors are functional and integrated with our networks. We now have access to the complete human archaeological database." Buzik rubbed his antenna thoughtfully. The database contained surveys of thousands of worlds, detailed analysis of millions of artifacts, and theoretical frameworks that revolutionized understanding of galactic history. The humans had shared some of this knowledge with other species, but not all of it. What about the restricted files, the ones marked with high-level security codes? Those were wiped before the evacuation. We found empty directories and scrubbed storage sectors. Whatever the humans considered too sensitive to share, they took with them. Buzik found this curious but not concerning. Every species had secrets. What mattered was the treasure trove of knowledge they had left behind. His people would spend decades just understanding the basic principles of human technology. In the former human military academy on Olympus Station, Admiral Thoknar studied human tactical manuals with religious devotion. The Zenthari military commander had spent his entire career fighting limited border conflicts and suppressing minor rebellions. Now he had access to strategies developed by a species that had somehow achieved peace across hundreds of worlds. The human officer Dong Hyun had been famous for his innovative approaches to conflict resolution. His writings described warfare not as domination, but as a tool for creating lasting stability. His tactical doctrines emphasized minimal casualties, rapid resolution, and post-conflict reconciliation. "Fascinating," Thoknar muttered, reading a chapter titled Victory Through Understanding. The humans seemed to fight wars in order to prevent future wars. His aide, a veteran named Sektar, looked over his shoulder. "Unusual philosophy, Admiral. Our traditional approach focuses on complete subjugation." "Yes, but look at the results." Thoknar gestured to a galactic map on the wall. The humans controlled territory across 12 sectors and experienced 0 internal conflicts for over 2 centuries. No rebellions, no civil wars, no resource disputes. Sektar studied the map. How did they manage such stability? According to these manuals, they treated conquered populations as future allies rather than permanent enemies. They invested in infrastructure, respected local customs, and gradually integrated new worlds into their society. Thoknar found this approach both brilliant and incomprehensible. Zenthari military doctrine taught that fear was the foundation of order. Conquered species should remain subjugated to prevent future challenges. But the human approach suggested that cooperation was more effective than coercion. "Admiral," Sektar said carefully, "should we implement these strategies in our new territories?" Thoknar considered this. The Zenthari Empire had tripled in size since claiming human worlds. Managing such a vast territory would require new approaches. Traditional methods might not be sufficient. Begin small-scale trials, he decided. Test human methodologies on recently acquired colonies. Document results carefully. On the ocean world of Aquatica, the Nethys had transformed human underwater cities into thriving cultural centers. What had once been research stations and mining platforms were now art galleries, performance spaces, and educational institutes. Swimera, a Nethys cultural coordinator, glided through the central plaza of New Busan, marveling at human architectural design. The structures were both functional and beautiful, with flowing curves that complemented the ocean environment. The humans had built these cities to study deep-sea ecosystems and mine rare minerals from the ocean floor. But their designs showed an appreciation for beauty that the Nethys found deeply moving. Every building incorporated artistic elements. Every corridor featured decorative details. "Report from engineering," bubbled Glubnik, her assistant. "The human life support systems have been successfully modified for our physiology. Water circulation is optimal, pressure regulation is flawless, and the structural integrity exceeds our requirements." Swimara nodded, creating a stream of pleased bubbles. The human engineers had built these cities to last. Every system had backup protocols, redundant safety measures, and automated repair capabilities. It was as if they had designed them to function without maintenance for centuries. What about their research data? Have our scientists reviewed the human ocean studies? Extensively. The humans discovered 7 new species in our own territorial waters. Their ecological models revealed ecosystem interactions we had never noticed. We're implementing their sustainable farming techniques across our agricultural platforms. This impressed Swimara greatly. The Nethys had lived in these oceans for thousands of years, but the humans had understood them better in just decades of study. Their research had identified problems the Nethys didn't even know existed, and provided solutions that benefited everyone. In the deepest part of the city, Swimara discovered something that made her pause. It was a small chamber that appeared to serve no functional purpose. The walls were covered with artistic representations of various species, Zenthari, Krillian, Nethys, and others, all depicted working together in harmony. At the center of the room stood a statue of a human figure with arms outstretched, as if embracing the galaxy itself. Below it, carved in multiple languages, was a simple message: "For those who come after." Swimara stared at this monument for a long time. The humans had built it knowing they would never see it completed. They had created this gift for species they might never meet, in hopes of fostering cooperation and understanding. Meanwhile, in the Outer Rim territories, strange reports were beginning to accumulate. Deep space monitoring stations detected unusual energy readings. Long-range scout ships reported navigation equipment malfunctioning in certain sectors. Automated trading vessels arrived at their destinations with crews who couldn't remember portions of their journeys, but these incidents were minor, scattered across vast distances, and easily dismissed as equipment failures or pilot error. The major powers of the galaxy were too busy enjoying their newfound wealth to investigate minor anomalies. The Galactic Council's monthly assembly had become a celebration of prosperity. Trade revenues were at all-time highs. Military conflicts had decreased dramatically. Scientific advancement was accelerating as species shared and improved upon abandoned human technologies. Council leader Vexathera addressed the assembly with obvious satisfaction. "Fellow representatives, we gather today to acknowledge an unprecedented era of galactic prosperity. The voluntary departure of the human species has allowed our civilizations to reach their full potential." Applause filled the chamber. The Krillian delegate buzzed with enthusiasm. The emergency alert reached Admiral Thoknar while he was reviewing human tactical manuals in his private study. His aide rushed in without the usual formal announcement, which told him immediately that something terrible had happened. "Admiral, we've lost contact with Battlefleet Omega," Sektar reported, his voice tight with controlled panic. Thoknar set down the manual he had been reading. Fleet Omega was the pride of the Zenthari military, 1,200 ships led by Admiral Kexavor, his most experienced commander. They had been conducting routine patrols in the Outer Rim territories, newly claimed human space that the Zenthari were still integrating into their empire. "Define lost contact," Thoknar said carefully. "Complete communication blackout as of 6 hours ago. No distress signals, no automated status updates, no response to direct hails. It's as if the entire fleet simply vanished." Thoknar stood and walked to his strategic display. The holographic map showed the galaxy divided into territorial zones. Fleet Omega's last known position was marked with a pulsing red indicator in what used to be human space. Equipment malfunction? Solar storms? Subspace interference? Sektar shook his head. "Negative on all counts. The area shows normal space. Conditions. Long-range sensors detect no unusual activity." "Then send a reconnaissance force. I want to know what happened to those ships." 3 days later, the reconnaissance ships returned with a report that changed everything. The leader of the mission, Captain Hexral, stood before the full Zenthari High Command with data that challenged everything they thought they knew about physics. "Admirals," he began, "we found the location where Fleet Omega was last detected. There is nothing there." "Nothing?" Admiral Thoknar leaned forward. "Define nothing." Captain Hexral activated a holographic display, where a star system should have been. There was only empty space. Not destroyed debris, not scattered wreckage, not even cosmic dust. Simply a perfect sphere of absolute void. The Kepler 438 system contained 1 star, 6 planets, 2 asteroid belts, and hundreds of mining stations. All of it is gone. Not destroyed, gone. As if it never existed. The room fell silent. Admiral Vecthara, who had been attending via hologram from the council chambers, spoke first. "Captain, that's impossible. Matter cannot simply cease to exist." "Respectfully, Admiral, our instruments confirm the readings. We've run every diagnostic protocol. The results are consistent." Captain Hexral switched to a different view. "Furthermore, we detected similar voids in 3 neighboring systems. Perfect spheres, each approximately 1 light-year in diameter, containing absolutely nothing." Dr. Rexthan, the Zenthari chief scientist, examined the data with growing confusion. The gravitational effects alone should be catastrophic. Removing that much mass from spacetime should create massive distortions, disrupting nearby systems. But according to these readings, spacetime appears completely normal. "As if the missing systems were never there to begin with," Captain Hexral. "Confirmed. The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. If entire star systems could be erased from existence without leaving any trace, then no world was safe. The technology required for such an act was beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined." Admiral Thoknar dismissed the meeting and immediately opened secure communications with the other major powers. Within hours, the Galactic Council was holding an emergency session. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species tried to make sense of the impossible reports. Some demanded proof, others suggested cover-ups, and a few proposed that the data must be fabricated. Council leader Vexathara called for order. "The Zenthari military has provided sensor data from multiple sources. The readings are consistent, across all instruments. We must accept that something unprecedented is occurring in the Outer Rim." "But what could cause such effects?" demanded the Krillian representative. "No known technology can erase matter from existence." It was then that Dr. Glexistar, a Krillian scientist who had been studying human research data, made a connection that chilled everyone present. "There is one possibility," he said quietly. "In the abandoned human laboratories on Kepler 442b, we found theoretical research into something called dimensional displacement. The human scientist Subin had developed models describing how matter could be moved between parallel dimensions. The chamber erupted in discussion. Dimensional theory was considered highly speculative by most galactic civilizations. The mathematics involved were so complex that only the most advanced species had even attempted to study the concepts. "Are you suggesting the humans had developed dimensional technology?" asked the Nethys representative. "Not necessarily," Dr. Glextar replied. "But Subin's research described entities that existed between dimensions. Her calculations suggested that such beings could theoretically remove matter from our reality by shifting it into parallel space." The Christarch delegate, whose silicon-based physiology allowed for rapid data processing, analyzed the implications immediately. If such entities exist, and if they're systematically removing star systems from our galaxy, then we face a threat beyond our ability to comprehend or combat. "But why would they target empty systems?" asked a smaller species representative. The missing locations contained mining operations and patrol routes, but no major populations. Admiral Thoknar, who had been silent during the discussion, finally spoke. "They're not targeting anything. They're expanding inward." He activated the chamber's central display and overlaid the missing systems on a galactic map. The pattern was clear once visualized. The voids formed a rough sphere centered in what used to be human space, expanding steadily toward the galaxy's populated core. At current rate of expansion, Thoknar calculated, the effect will reach major population centers within 18 months. Panic spread through the chamber. Representatives began demanding immediate military mobilization, evacuation protocols, and research initiatives. But Admiral Thoknar raised a disturbing question. "How do you fight an enemy that can erase you from existence itself? Our weapons are designed to destroy matter, not defend against its removal from reality." The discussion continued for hours, without reaching any useful conclusions. The assembled species had no frame of reference for such a threat. Their combined knowledge of dimensional physics was primitive compared to what would be required to understand, let alone combat, entities that could manipulate reality itself. It was Dr. Buzik who made the suggestion that no one wanted to hear. "Perhaps," he said hesitantly, "we should attempt to contact the humans. Their research was clearly more advanced than we realized. They might possess knowledge that could help us understand what we're facing." The suggestion was met with immediate resistance. Pride prevented most species from admitting they might need help from the very civilization they had been glad to see leave. Moreover, the humans had vanished completely. No one knew how to contact them even if they wanted to. "The humans abandoned us," Vexothera stated firmly. "They left knowing this threat existed and said nothing. Why should we trust them now?" But privately, many representatives were beginning to wonder if the human departure had been connected to the current crisis. The timing seemed too coincidental. An entire species vanishing just months before an existential threat emerged from the same region of space. In the weeks that followed, more expeditions were sent to investigate the expanding voids. Each mission confirmed the same impossible results. Star systems were being systematically erased from existence, leaving no trace of their former presence. The effect was accelerating. What had started as isolated incidents was becoming a steady progression inward. Long-range sensors detected the signature energy patterns that preceded each erasure, but no one could determine their source or mechanism. Dr. Swimara, the Nethys cultural coordinator, made a discovery that added another piece to the growing puzzle. While exploring the deepest levels of the former human city, New Busan, she found a sealed archive that had been missed in previous surveys. The archive contained personal recordings made by human researchers in the months before the evacuation. The messages described growing concern about dimensional instabilities detected in the outer rim. One recording, made by a young human named Kyung Ho, was particularly disturbing. Day 847 of monitoring project. The quantum readings are getting stronger. Whatever's causing the dimensional fractures is definitely getting closer. Dr. Mireille thinks we have maybe 6 months before it reaches inhabited space. The evacuation protocols are being finalized. God help whatever civilization tries to face this without preparation. The recording was dated 3 months before the human evacuation began. Swimara immediately shared this discovery with the Council Intelligence Division. For the first time, there was proof that the humans had known about the threat in advance. They had monitored it, studied it, and ultimately decided that evacuation was the only viable response. The revelation sent shockwaves through the galactic community. If humanity, with their advanced technology and aggressive nature, had chosen to flee rather than fight, what hope did other species have? Some council members suggested immediate evacuation to other galaxies, but the logistics were impossible. Billions of beings could not be relocated with available transportation. Others proposed underground bunkers or deep. The dimensional voids had consumed 17 star systems by the time the Galactic Council admitted they were powerless to stop them. Council leader Vexathara stood in the emergency command center, watching holographic displays track the steady advance of nothingness toward populated space. "Status report," she commanded, though she dreaded the answer. Dr. Rexthon consulted his instruments with shaking hands. "The expansion rate is increasing. We initially calculated 18 months, before the effect reached major population centers. Current projections show 6 months. Vexathara closed her eyes. 6 months to find a solution to a problem that challenged the very foundations of physics. Her species had conquered dozens of worlds through superior military technology. But how did one fight an enemy that erased matter from existence itself? What about the evacuation proposals? Logistics remain impossible. We lack sufficient transport capacity to relocate even 1% of the affected populations. The outer rim colonies are beginning unauthorized evacuations, but most are fleeing toward the galactic core, which only delays the inevitable. Through the viewports of the command center, Vexathara could see the steady stream of refugee ships arriving at Zenthari Prime. Families carrying everything they owned, fleeing worlds that might not exist in a few months. The sight filled her with a helplessness she had never experienced. On the research station Omega-7, Dr. Buzik worked desperately to understand the dimensional physics involved in the erasures. His team had been studying abandoned human research for weeks, trying to decode theoretical frameworks that were centuries ahead of current galactic understanding. "Dr. Buzik," his assistant Chirip called from across the laboratory, "I've found something in the human data that might be significant." Buzik rushed to examine the discovery. On Chirip's screen was a partial file recovered from Jin'e's quantum engineering laboratory. The human scientist had been working on something called dimensional anchor technology before the evacuation. According to these notes, Chirip explained, Jin'e believed it might be possible to create stable barriers between dimensional layers. The mathematics are incredibly complex, but the basic principle involves generating quantum resonance fields that prevent dimensional displacement. Buzik studied the equations with growing excitement. If the theory was correct, dimensional anchors could protect star systems from the erasure effect. But the technology required resources and knowledge that his team simply didn't possess. How? Much of the research is complete? Only about 30%. Jin'e's notes indicate she was working on prototype designs, but we haven't found any actual hardware or test results. Buzik's antenna drooped with disappointment. 30% of a theoretical framework was not enough to build functional protection against dimensional entities. They needed the complete research, or better yet, the humans who had created it. Meanwhile, desperate attempts to contact humanity continued across the galaxy. Every species tried different approaches. Radio transmissions, quantum entanglement arrays, even primitive light-speed signals broadcast toward the outer rim. All failed to produce any response. It was as if humanity had vanished, not just from the galaxy, but from existence itself. No trace of their passage remained in the empty systems they had once inhabited. Even their quantum signatures had faded from the cosmic background radiation. Admiral Thoknar coordinated the military response to the crisis, but every strategy proved futile. Battle fleets positioned at the edge of the void zones detected nothing to fight. Weapons designed to destroy matter were useless against an enemy that existed between dimensions. "Sir," reported Captain Hexral, "we've attempted every combat protocol in our database. Kinetic weapons, energy beams, quantum torpedoes, gravity bombs. Nothing affects the dimensional boundaries. Our ships can approach the void zones, but sensors detect no targets to engage." Thoknar nodded grimly. He had expected this result, but hope had demanded they try everything. The human tactical manuals he had been studying offered no guidance for this type of conflict. Apparently, even humanity's advanced strategic thinking had no answers for dimensional warfare. "Withdraw all combat units to defensive positions around populated systems," he ordered. "If we cannot stop the advance, we'll at least evacuate civilians when the time comes." But privately, Thoknar knew that evacuation would only delay the inevitable. The voids were expanding in all directions, and their rate of growth suggested that the entire galaxy would eventually be consumed. In the deep archives of the Council Intelligence Division, automated analysis systems continued processing data from across the galaxy. The computers had been programmed to look for patterns that organic minds might miss, and they were beginning to detect something significant. The dimensional erasures were not random. They followed specific pathways through space-time, avoiding certain regions while consuming others completely. More importantly, the pattern suggested intelligence behind the destruction. Someone or something was making deliberate choices about which systems to erase. Unfortunately, the only person who might have understood the significance of this pattern was Wu Jin, a former human ambassador whose private journals contained insights into dimensional theory that were far ahead of galactic understanding. His writings remained in the abandoned embassy archives, written in an encryption system that no current species could decode. Dr. Swimera had become obsessed with finding answers in the human ruins. She spent her days exploring abandoned research facilities, hoping to discover some clue that might help her people understand what they faced. In the former human laboratory on Aquatica, she found personal logs recorded by a young scientist named Hanul. The human had been barely out of university when she began working on theoretical physics projects that challenged conventional understanding of reality. Personal log, Hanul, Research Day 156, the recording began. Dr. Mireille says my calculations about multidimensional entities are too advanced for current understanding. She's probably right. Even I don't fully grasp the implications. But if I'm correct, these beings exist in the spaces between realities, and they're capable of manipulating matter across dimensional barriers. Swimara listened with growing fascination as Hanul described entities that fed on the quantum energy, released when matter was displaced between dimensions. According to her theories, these beings were ancient beyond measure, and they periodically harvested entire galaxies by converting all matter into pure energy. The frightening part, Hanul continued, is that they're not malicious. They're just following their nature, like bacteria consuming nutrients. To them, our entire civilization is nothing more than food. The recording ended abruptly, leaving Swimara with more questions than answers. If Hanul's theories were correct, then the galaxy faced an enemy that was both incomprehensibly powerful and utterly indifferent to their existence. She shared the discovery with the Council's scientific division, but the revelation only deepened the sense of helplessness. How could any civilization fight beings that viewed entire galaxies as sustenance? As the weeks passed, the effects of the approaching crisis began to manifest throughout galactic society. Trade routes through the outer rim were abandoned. Colonial governments collapsed as populations fled inward. Economic systems based on resource extraction from affected regions collapsed overnight. Panic spread faster than accurate information. Rumors suggested that the dimensional entities could appear anywhere without warning. Some species began evacuating their homeworlds preemptively, creating massive refugee crises in systems that were still supposedly safe. The Galactic Council tried to maintain order, but their authority was undermined by their obvious powerlessness against the threat. Emergency sessions devolved into chaos as representatives demanded solutions that no one could provide. It was during one such session that Dr. Glextar made a suggestion that horrified everyone present. "We should consider the possibility," he said quietly, "that the humans didn't flee from this threat. Maybe they went to fight it." The chamber fell silent. The idea that humanity might be engaged in some kind of dimensional warfare had never occurred to anyone. They had assumed that the humans had simply run away to save themselves. "If that's true," Admiral Thoknar said slowly, "then they might return, either victorious or defeated. Or they might not return at all," Vexithara replied. "If they're fighting entities that can erase matter from existence, humanity might already be gone." The discussion that followed was heated but ultimately pointless. Without any way to contact humanity or observe the conflict, they could only speculate about what might be happening in the dimensional spaces beyond reality. What they didn't know was that scattered throughout the abandoned human facilities were hidden caches of technology designed specifically for dimensional warfare. weapons that could strike across parallel realities, shields that could deflect attacks from beings that existed between dimensions, and communication systems that could reach across the barriers between worlds. The caches were protected by quantum locks that required human genetic codes to open. They had been left behind as a final safeguard, in case humanity failed in their mission and other species needed to continue the fight. But without humans to activate them, the weapons remained. Hid? The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. Dr. Swim-Ara was exploring the deepest levels of the abandoned human research station on Aquatica when she discovered a chamber that her sensors had somehow missed in previous surveys. The room was small and appeared to be a personal workspace. Charts covered the walls, showing dimensional mathematics that hurt to look at directly. At the center sat a single computer terminal that had somehow remained active for over a year since the human evacuation. The screen displayed a simple message. For those who come after, when hope seems lost, remember that courage is not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Dr. Xiongmin Swimara approached the terminal carefully. Unlike other human computers, this one responded to her touch. The interface was designed for multiple species with symbols and concepts that transcended language barriers. Archive access granted, the computer announced in perfect Nethys speech patterns. You are accessing the Emergency Protocol database. This information is released only when dimensional incursion has reached critical mass. The files that opened changed everything. Dr. Xiongmin had been humanity's leading expert on dimensional entities. For 50 years, he had studied the threat, developed countermeasures, and coordinated humanity's response. His archive contained the complete truth about what the galaxy faced. Personal log, Dr. Xiongmin, Day 18th, 250 of the Monitoring Project. The first recording began. We have confirmed the approach of the Devourers. These entities have consumed over 400 galaxies in our local cluster. Based on their historical pattern, they will begin harvesting our galaxy within 2 years. Swimara's communication. Bladders contracted with shock. 400 galaxies. The scale of destruction was beyond comprehension. The Devourers exist between dimensional layers, Xiongmin continued. They feed on the quantum energy released when matter is displaced from one reality to another. A single entity can erase entire star systems by shifting them into parallel dimensions where they cannot exist. The archive contained 50 years of research into the Devourer's nature, capabilities, and weaknesses. Xiongmin had dedicated his life to understanding beings that existed beyond normal physics. His work revealed truths that no other species had even imagined. We have identified the Devourer's primary weakness, another recording explained. They cannot exist simultaneously in multiple dimensional layers. When forced to manifest fully in our reality, they become vulnerable to weapons designed to disrupt quantum coherence. Swimara transmitted the discovery immediately to the Galactic Council. Within hours, emergency sessions were convened as representatives struggled to understand the implications of Xiongmin's research. The archives revealed that humanity had been preparing for this war for 5 decades. Every major human project, from dimensional research to colony evacuation protocols, had been designed with the Devourer threat in mind. We cannot evacuate 47 billion humans to safety, explained a recording made by Yunji, a human military strategist. But we can evacuate them to a position of strategic advantage. The dimensional spaces between realities offer refuge, but more importantly, they provide a staging area for offensive operations. The truth hit the Council like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't fled in cowardice. They had positioned themselves to fight a war that other species couldn't even perceive. While the galaxy celebrated their departure, humans had been engaging the Devourers in battles fought across multiple dimensions. But why didn't they tell us? Demanded the Krillian representative. Why didn't they warn us or ask for help? Dr. Glextar, who had been studying the archives intensively, provided the answer. Because we wouldn't have believed them. Look at our response to the current crisis. Panic, denial, blame. The humans needed united action, not political chaos. Admiral Thoknar studied Yunji's strategic analyses with professional admiration. The human military planner had designed a campaign that spanned multiple realities using dimensional manipulation as both weapon and shield. Her strategies required technological capabilities that no other species possessed. According to these files, Thoknar reported to the emergency session, humanity has been engaging the Devourers for 8 months. The dimensional incursions we've observed are evidence of the ongoing battle, not preparation for invasion. The realization transformed everything. The voids in space weren't advancing invasions. They were battle scars from a war being fought in dimensions that other species couldn't perceive. Humanity was out there, fighting for the galaxy's survival, while the species they protected remained unaware of the conflict. But the archives also contained disturbing information. Minho, a human philosopher whose writings explored the ethics of cosmic responsibility, had calculated the probable cost of victory. The Devourers can only be stopped through quantum disruption on a massive scale, his analysis explained. The weapon systems required would destabilize dimensional barriers across multiple realities. Successfully deploying such weapons would likely erase the users from existence itself. The implications were clear. Humanity was fighting a war they could only win by sacrificing themselves completely. Not death, erasure from reality itself, as if they had never existed. They knew, whispered Dr. Swim Ara as she read Min Ho's final entries. They knew that saving the galaxy would cost them everything, and they chose to do it anyway. The archives revealed the full scope of humanity's sacrifice. They had developed weapons capable of destroying dimensional entities, but using them required the operator to exist simultaneously in multiple realities. The quantum stress would tear apart anyone attempting such an act, erasing them from all possible timelines. Emergency sessions ran continuously as the galactic species struggled to process the truth. Some representatives demanded immediate military support for humanity's efforts. Others argued that the revelation proved humans were too dangerous to trust. A few suggested that humanity's sacrifice was meaningless if other species couldn't benefit from their victory. It was Dr. Buzik who made the discovery that changed everything again. Hidden in Jinneh's laboratory was a secondary archive containing technical specifications for dimensional anchor technology. But this wasn't theoretical research. It was a complete weapons manual. The humans left us the tools to help, Buzik announced to the assembled council. These dimensional anchors can create stable zones that the Devourers cannot affect. We can protect our worlds while humanity fights the war. The manual was comprehensive, containing step-by-step instructions for building and deploying dimensional anchor networks. The technology was advanced, but achievable using current galactic industrial capacity. Humanity had designed it specifically for other species to use. But why hide it? Asked the Nethys representative. Why not give us these designs openly? The answer came from Hanul's personal journals, discovered in the deepest archives. The young human scientist had struggled with the same question during her final months in the galaxy. We considered sharing the anchor technology immediately, her final entry revealed. But the political process would take years. Committees would study it, committees would debate it, committees would modify it until it no longer worked. We don't have years. The Devourers are coming now. So humanity had made the choice for everyone. They had fought the war themselves while leaving, behind the tools needed for others to survive it. The dimensional anchors were their gift to a galaxy that had never appreciated their presence. Construction of the anchor networks began immediately. Every major power contributed resources and expertise to the project. The Zenthari provided industrial capacity, the Krillians supplied advanced manufacturing, the Nethys offered their expertise in deep space construction. For the first time in galactic history, every species worked together toward a common goal. The crisis had forced them to overcome centuries of mistrust and competition. Humanity's sacrifice was uniting the galaxy in ways that diplomacy had never achieved. But time was running short. The dimensional voids continued their expansion even as the anchor networks took shape. Long-range sensors detected massive quantum disruptions in the spaces between realities, evidence that humanity's war was reaching its climax. Dimensional stress is increasing exponentially, reported Dr. Rexthon during one of the emergency sessions. The barriers between realities are becoming unstable. If the current trend continues, the boundary collapse could affect our entire local cluster. The implications were terrifying. If humanity's weapons destabilize dimensional barriers too severely, the resulting cascade could erase not just their galaxy, but dozens of neighboring ones. They were fighting to save everyone while risking everything in the process. In the outer rim, the first-dimensional anchor networks came online. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Star systems protected by the anchors remained stable even as void zones expanded around them. The technology worked exactly as humanity had promised, but the anchors could only protect what already existed. They couldn't restore the systems that had already been consumed, and they couldn't help humanity win their war in the dimensional spaces between realities. As the galactic species watched their instruments and waited for news they couldn't receive, they began to understand the full magnitude of humanity's gift, not just the diamond. The end began with silence. For 3 days, the dimensional readings that had plagued the galaxy for months simply stopped. The void zones ceased expanding. The quantum disruptions that had torn at reality's fabric went quiet. Even the background, radiation that had marked the ongoing war between dimensions, faded to nothing. In the emergency command center on Zenthari Prime, Dr. Rexthon stared at instruments that showed impossibly normal readings. "Status report," Admiral Thoknar demanded, though his voice carried no hope. "All dimensional activity has ceased," Rexthon replied quietly. "Space-time appears stable throughout the affected regions. The anchor networks are functioning normally, but there's nothing left for them to anchor against." Thoknar nodded grimly. The silence could mean only one thing. The war was over, and someone had won. The question was who. On the 4th day, reality began to fracture. It started small. Minor glitches in gravity fields, temporary failures in quantum communication systems, brief moments when starlight seemed to bend in impossible directions. But the anomalies grew stronger and more frequent as something vast stirred in the spaces between worlds. Dr. Swimara was monitoring the dimensional anchor network from Aquatica when the first major manifestation occurred. Her instruments detected massive quantum displacement directly above the galactic core, centered on the ancient supermassive black hole that anchored their entire stellar neighborhood. "Council Command, this is Aquatica Station," she transmitted urgently. "We're detecting unprecedented dimensional activity at the galactic center. Something is trying to manifest in our reality." The response came from Admiral Thoknar himself. "Confirmed, Aquatica. All stations report similar readings. Recommend immediate evacuation to anchor-protected systems." But evacuation was impossible. Whatever was manifesting at the galactic core was too large, too powerful, and too fundamental to reality itself. If it chose to appear in their dimension, nothing could stop it. The manifestation took 6 hours to complete. Across the galaxy, every species with dimensional sensors watched as something unimaginably vast forced itself into their reality. The readings were beyond comprehension, a single entity whose presence warped space-time across thousands of light years. When the process finished, the galaxy faced its first devourer. The being was beautiful and terrible, existing partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that caused pain to observe directly. It moved with purpose toward the densest concentration of matter, the galactic core where billions of stars provided the quantum energy it needed to sustain itself. But as the devourer began its harvest, something impossible happened. Reality fractured around it, and from the cracks between dimensions came weapons that should not have existed. The first strike materialized directly inside the devourer's core structure. Quantum disruption beams that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously tore at the entity's ability to maintain coherence across multiple realities. The being recoiled, its beautiful form flickering as it struggled to remain manifested. "Impossible," whispered Dr. Glextar from his observation post. "Those weapons are firing from dimensional coordinates that don't exist in our physics." A second wave of attacks followed, and this time observers caught glimpses of the attackers. Ships that phased in and out of visibility, crewed by figures in environmental suits that bent light around them. The vessels moved with impossible agility, striking from angles that existed outside normal space-time. Admiral Thoknar recognized the tactical patterns immediately. Those are human maneuvers. Somehow, they're still fighting. The battle raged across multiple dimensions, visible to the galaxy's inhabitants only as brief flashes of incomprehensible conflict. Weapons that existed in parallel realities struck at an enemy that fed on the boundaries between worlds. Each exchange sent ripples through space-time that the dimensional anchors barely contained. But the cost of the battle became clear as the engagement continued. Every time the human forces manifested in normal space, they appeared less solid, less real. The quantum stress of existing in multiple dimensions was tearing them apart at the most fundamental level. Dr. Swimara watched in horror as a human ship materialized long enough to deliver a devastating attack against the Devourers. Dimensional anchor points. For a brief moment, she could see the crew through the ship's transparent hull. Figures that seemed to be fading away even as they fought. "They're erasing themselves," she transmitted to the Council. "Each attack is costing them their existence in our reality." The battle reached its climax when the human fleet launched a coordinated assault on the Devourer's core consciousness. Ships commanded by officers whose names would never be remembered struck with weapons that violated the laws of physics. The entity's beautiful form began to collapse as its ability to exist across multiple dimensions was systematically destroyed. In the final moment, a single human ship penetrated the Devourer's deepest defenses. The vessel was commanded by Junseo, though no one in the galaxy would ever know his name. His final transmission reached across dimensional barriers to warn his people of one last danger. Dimensional cascade imminent. Initiate quantum isolation. Protocols. For those who come after, remember us as we were, not as we choose to become. The explosion that followed existed in 37 dimensions simultaneously. The Devourer's death throes sent shockwaves across reality itself, threatening to collapse the barriers between all possible worlds. In response, the remaining human forces did the only thing that could contain the damage. They sacrificed their existence to seal the dimensional rifts. So Young, a human engineer whose dimensional anchors had held reality together throughout the war, made the final choice. Her equipment could stabilize the collapsing boundaries between worlds, but only by using herself as a quantum bridge between realities. She became part of the dimensional structure itself, ensuring that the cascade would end with humanity's erasure. Hyun Woo, a pilot whose ship carried the last humans in existence, guided his vessel into the heart of the collapsing dimensional matrix. His final act was to activate a quantum resonance field that would rewrite reality itself, removing all trace of humanity's existence while preserving everything they had died to protect. The silence that followed was absolute. When the quantum storms faded, the galaxy found itself fundamentally changed. The Devourer was gone, its massive presence erased from existence as if it had never been. The dimensional voids that had consumed dozens of star systems remained empty, but they no longer expanded. The threat that had nearly destroyed Galactic civilization was ended, but so was humanity, not killed, not conquered, not scattered to distant worlds, erased. The quantum weapons they had used to destroy the Devourer had also removed them from reality itself. Every trace of their existence was wiped clean, their colonies, their technology, their influence on galactic history. Reality rewrote itself to fill the gaps. The dimensional anchor networks now appeared to be ancient Zenthari technology. The advanced research facilities were credited to Krillian scientists. The underwater cities became Nethys cultural achievements. Every human contribution to galactic civilization was seamlessly attributed to other species. Only fragmentary inconsistencies remained. Equipment that seemed too advanced for its supposed creators. Mathematical theories that appeared without foundation. Architectural styles that didn't match any known cultural patterns. Dr. Swimara found herself staring at the statue in the deepest part of New Busan, reading words carved in languages she couldn't identify. For those who come after, the inscription read, though she couldn't remember why that phrase seemed important. She had the strangest feeling that something was missing from galactic history, empty spaces where significant events should have been recorded, gaps in the timeline that made no logical sense. But every time she tried to focus on the inconsistencies, her thoughts slipped away like water through her fingers. The Zenthari, archivist Kethmara, became obsessed with these historical gaps. She spent her days in the council archives, documenting anomalies that no one else seemed to notice, equipment blueprints that referenced technologies that didn't exist, communication logs that mentioned species not in any database, trade agreements, with civilizations that had apparently never existed. "There's something missing," she told her colleagues repeatedly. "Something important that we've forgotten." But when pressed for details, she could never explain what was missing or why it mattered. The gaps in her knowledge felt significant, but she couldn't articulate their nature or importance. Sometimes, late at night in the archives, Kethmara found herself writing names in scripts she didn't recognize. Jun Seo, So Young, Hyun Woo. The names felt important, like they belonged to heroes whose stories should be remembered. But when she researched them, she found no records, no histories, no evidence that anyone by those names had ever existed. The galaxy entered a new era of unprecedented peace and cooperation. The crisis had forced every species to work together, creating bonds of mutual respect that transcended old rivalries. The dimensional anchor technology became the foundation for a new age of scientific advancement and exploration. No one questioned the origins of the technology or wondered why such advanced concepts had appeared so suddenly. The anchors worked perfectly, protecting